4:15, that means Creation Ministries International, and this week we have Dr. John in the studio. Good afternoon, Dr. John.
Good afternoon, Mick.
It's great to have you here again. Of course, you guys have a website, creation.com, where people can go and get answers for all sorts of questions, but we have you here, and that means that people can contact us right now and ask you about all sorts of things, from dinosaurs to aliens to creation to evolution and everything in between. And there's a lot in between.
There is a lot in between, Mick. And we've been talking a bit about that before we came on air, about the uses that AI has been put to.
Dr. John, I was just showing you an image. Now, this little image that I was showing you off air is a little Creation Ministries sort of... I guess it's the face of our podcasts. It's something that we'd like to use on our podcast, which people will be able to go to, just YouTube, and they'll be able to go like Rema, Creation Ministries, and these things will come up. And that image that you can see there, the image was actually created by artificial intelligence.
Amazing, isn't it? You know, you can use it for anything. And I mean, we talked, over the last couple of weeks about how that animal activist group, PETA, got AI to rewrite parts of the Bible to make it more animal friendly.
Yeah.
And I mean, the uses that it could be put to are just limitless. You know, you could get it to write a new Bible that was sin-free.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you really could, and get rid of all the uncomfortable passages in it that some people don't like,
Yep.
and you'd have a sin-free Bible. And it might be salvation-free too, but, I mean, that doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah. Well, you know how they say these days, well, even for us, in media, we're not allowed to just go and steal someone else's story. We're allowed to talk about the story if we mention who they are and what they said. Mm-hmm. But, otherwise we have to go and look up many stories. If we're looking up, a story about Microsoft, say, because they've been really big lately in artificial intelligence. If we want to tell that story, well, we've got to go and get it from a whole lot of different publications. And that's called research then. We get little bits from all of them and tie it all back together and create a whole new story. But you see, if I want to write that story today, I can get AI to go and get all those stories from a whole lot of different publications and rewrite it all for me in a matter of seconds.
I know. It is amazing. And look, I was looking up a couple of things in Science Alert, and one of them was a really fascinating one for us from a Creation Ministries point of view. Mm-hmm. And that was how AI has now decided what wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, for years... Well, I mean, we've all heard that the dinosaurs were wiped out 65 million years ago or whatever. And I suppose for the last couple of decades, people, the most in the science world, have decided that it was an asteroid impact somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
In fact, they think that it's what formed the Gulf of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the aftermath of that was supposedly what wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yep.
But now they've fed all the all sorts of other information into AI, and it says no, it wasn't an asteroid impact. You'll never guess what it was.
I don't know what.
It was climate change.
Of course it was. Okay.
You wouldn't believe it, would you? 65 million years ago, and climate change was what wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yeah, well, you see, they didn't have unleaded fuel back then.
No, but still it was climate change, and they believe it was climate change caused by a whole lot of volcanic activity. And that's the answer they got when they fed all the information into AI. Yep, climate change as a result of volcanic activity.
And you know what? It's probably only been the last 6 weeks or so, I've seen numerous stories in the media where they're saying, oh, no, look, we now know the answer because AI has just told us.
That's right.
To all sorts of different questions.
Yeah. I mean, AI has virtually become God, really. I mean, AI knows everything, and AI is never wrong.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about this because they fed all this information into the AI computer, and they knew that there had been a lot of volcanic activity that produced this climate change, and they knew that because there's a place in India called the Deccan Plateau, and it's got lava about a mile thick. You know, I mean, that's quite a bit of lava. So there was a pretty big volcano that erupted there.
Yep.
And of course, you know, when you think about what the Bible talks about what triggered the flood, it talks about how all the fountains of the great deep were broken up. You know, so we do know that you know, leading up to Noah's flood, there was all this volcanic activity. But they also did a couple of strange things. They did some carbon analysis of seashells. Now, how they worked out that was caused by climate change, I don't know. But interestingly enough, an analysis of sea temperatures from looking at seashells. Now, once again, I mean, AI knows more than I do. But that's what it came up with. And isn't it interesting, you know, that they started looking at sea temperatures. Now, one of the things that we talk about at Creation Ministries is the world has all sorts of speculations as to what caused the ice ages.
Yep.
Well, creationists have come up with a theory about what caused the only ice age, which lasted for a couple of centuries after Noah's flood.
Yep.
And when you think about it, we hear about how all the fountains of the great deep were broken up and we had all this volcanic activity.
Yep.
Well, the water in the flood was probably pretty warm.
Yeah.
You know, might have been very hot.
Yeah.
But that would have caused a great deal of evaporation and then a lot of precipitation.
And evaporation causes cooling.
Yeah, exactly, and all of that precipitation would have fallen as snow in the northern regions, and I mean that's where all the great ice sheets formed. And interestingly enough, the locking up of all the water in the form of ice would have lowered the sea levels, and that would have allowed for land bridges between, say, Asia and PNG and Australia.
It all makes sense.
And facilitated the movement of animals and man over those things. And of course, when the ice age finished and all of that ice started to melt, the sea levels returned to what they are now.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it all makes a great deal of sense.
Yes.
But you know, I doubt if we've heard the end of it, because the people who do believe that an asteroid impact was the cause, they'll probably be able to come up, ask AI and feed a few other things in, and they'll probably get the old climate change one overturned.
Well, my son is an AI expert, and as he said, the only stuff you get out of AI is what you put in, because that's how it works.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's the old, you know, the old expression they use about computers. You know, garbage in, garbage out, and whatever you put in, it'll analyse that, and if you put in error, then the answer is going to be error.
Yep.
You know, it can't possibly come up with the truth if you put in error. But anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting, and of course, if only the secular scientists would read the Bible, you know, I reckon they'd get a whole lot more accurate ideas. But they don't seem to want to know that.
Look, it seems to make so much sense. The more that the Creation Ministry guys talk to us about how the Bible works and how science works and how it fits together, the more I scratch my head at what the world comes up with.
Yeah, it does, and it really is amazing. And I looked at that drawing that you got from with AI of rocks, and read it out to our listeners. What's it say?
Okay, well look, I was asked to do I guess a little sort of screenshot picture, an image with some text on it regarding Rima and Creation Ministries, and it was after speaking to Dr. Taz Walker a couple of weeks ago. So we've only put these together like really recently, and this particular one was after he was talking to us. Of course, he's scientist that's worked a lot with rocks and dating. So this one says, "Is there such a thing as a clock-a-rockometer to measure the date of rocks?"
Yeah.
And that was all put together, that whole image with a little clock-a-rockometer. I mean, there isn't such a thing, obviously, but the image looks really cool, and it looks like there really is one because I got AI to do it for me.
Well, there you go. But we're going to talk about that actually today, that clock-a-rockometer, because Dr. Walker did talk about how rock dating is not quite as accurate as a lot of people might like to think of it.
Yes, well,
and it just so happens that on the weekend there was a Creation Ministries article sent out by email about that very thing. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that.
Ooh, that sounds good. You're on 94.9. It is 26 minutes past 4. If you have any questions for Dr. John, please send them through to our text line. That's SMS 0401 949 949. Live, and we're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. And, of course, Creation Ministries have a website, creation.com. You can go there anytime and get questions answered. Thousands of pages of information on there. But we'd love you to send any questions through to our text line. If you have a question, just send it through to us. The number 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, during the break just then, you started talking about a place in New Zealand, and I mentioned, I've been to Mount Ruapehu. I went skiing there before, and I've even seen smoke coming out of the ground from volcanoes.
Oh, New Zealand is a fascinating place, Mick, and it really, this was an article that was put out by Creation Ministries only last weekend. It's not new, it's a couple of years old, but they reprinted it because it's very pertinent to what you were talking about with Dr. Taz Walker last week.
Yep.
About how the inconsistencies in rock dating, and how you can't put any gadget on a rock to tell you how old it is.
Well, the heading is obviously on the creation.com website. The heading is /radioactive dating failure, and in between the words there's a little minus side. So radioactive dating failure. Interesting story. If you want to look it up, definitely check it out.
Yeah, but I'll just briefly say what it was.
Yeah.
There's a mountain in the middle of the North Island, Mount Nuahui. And as you said, it's quite close to Mount Ruapehu, which you've been skiing on.
Yep.
But, Nuahui is a very, very interesting, it's a volcano, of course. We don't have any active volcanoes in Australia, but they've got plenty in New Zealand.
Yes.
And that's one of them. And as you rightly said, you see smoke coming out of it all the time.
Yeah.
But it's erupted quite a few times in the last 80 years. And, of course, with every eruption, you get a substantial lava flow coming out of the volcano.
Yep.
And, of course, all of those lava flows, all the various ones that have happened with each eruption, everybody knows exactly when they occurred, to the very day. So you can look at that lava flow and you can say, we know exactly how old that rock is.
Yep.
So you would reckon that here's a great chance to calibrate our rock dating.
Yes.
Because we know how old this one is.
Yep.
So some creation geologists took some samples from quite a few of the different lava flows, that were dated at different times.
Because they know the dates.
They know the dates. And they sent them off to a very respected dating laboratory in the US.
Yep.
And you wouldn't believe the answers that came back.
Accurate?
Yeah. Well, they said they might have been millions of years old.
Okay, so they were within millions of years of being accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you might say that.
All right.
But, this is what this rock dating business is all about. They usually use for rocks, one of the techniques is the potassium argon method. You know, potassium is a radioactive element, and it decays to argon, which is a gas. And the theory is, of course, that if you've got a red hot lava, then argon is a gas, so there's not going to be any argon in it because it will all have been evaporated off.
Yep.
And so any argon that you find in that sample has to have come from radioactive decay of the potassium.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So that's why it's a very useful, supposedly, rock chronometer. But when you test rocks of known age, like less than 80 years old, and that comes up with answers in the millions, you have to suspect that maybe rock dating is not quite as accurate as you might have been led to believe.
No.
And I mean, this is the case, you know. When you check rocks of known age, they come up with dates in the millions as well. And really, if you can't get the right answer when you know the answer, why would you trust the answer when you haven't got a clue what the answer is?
Well, because the answer they just make up. They have to get something
Well,
to fit in.
well-
What is a chronometer? You just mentioned chronometer.
A chronometer is something that measures time, age. You know, that
It's like a clock-a-rockometer.
well, clock a rockometer,
Right.
but there really isn't any such thing. All of the techniques are indirect techniques, you know, measuring quantities of things like potassium or argon or whatever, and then determining an age from those quantities and making certain assumptions that there wasn't any argon to start with or whatever, you know, and that the radioactive decay rate has been the same all the time. You know, all of these things like that, which are all assumptions, because you cannot put an instrument on a rock to tell you how old it is.
Yep.
And as we've said so many times, if you can't get the right answer when you know the answer, why would you trust the answer when you haven't got a clue what the answer is? So that's why we say that all of the dating methods, including the rock dating, including carbon dating, because of the assumptions that you have to make that you cannot prove, the theory might be fine, but when you get the wrong answer when you know the answer, then surely you have to question the techniques.
You mentioned right up front then that they were a well-respected dating agency.
Yeah.
Are they still well-respected after that?
Well, they're well respected in the sense that they're careful with their scientific methods. You know, they make sure they don't get any of the samples contaminated and all of this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, they're respected because not because you can prove the answer. I mean, you can't prove an answer that says millions of years anyway. But they're respected because they are careful with the way they analyse and with the instruments that they use and things like that. So, that they are regarded in the radioactive dating world as one of the better laboratories. But that doesn't mean that the answers that they come up with are any better.
Wow, because I'm reading here that where they took the sample from, there was quite literally like 575,000 cubic metres of lava. So it's not like they only had a little bit to grab. They went and just grabbed some out of a giant mass, knowing exactly how old it is. And they were so wrong. So wrong by pretty much every year they come up with, which was millions of them.
Yeah, and that's right. And unfortunately, we have to say, as we've been said many times, you can't trust radioactive dating. Right? It sounds good, it sounds scientific, and people trust it. But in actual fact, out in the field, particularly things like carbon dating for geologists and archaeologists and so on, they have to give the laboratory the age they think it might be. Now, why would you do that? what difference does what you think it might be to the answer that you get?
Yeah.
And if the answer comes back consistent with what they think it might be, they'll accept it as an accurate answer.
Yeah.
But if it's way out, then it's discarded. Oh, there must have been an error somewhere, or whatever.
And the question comes, what are we paying these guys for?
Well, that's right. I mean, the whole field of radioactive dating is very, very we don't think it's reliable at all, because as far as we're concerned, what the Bible says is that the Earth is 6,000 years old approximately. Now, if that means, how can you come up with reliable answers in the millions of years or even the tens of thousands of years if the Bible is true? You can't, you know.
But surely, like, I mean, Adam and Eve, they were created as certain age humans. You know, they must have been 20 years old or something. Or looked. They're obviously only just
they certainly were of reproductive age. You can say that.
Yes, and the trees in the garden, all those sort of things, they're all created as an age. So, of course, why couldn't the rocks have been created to look like a certain age?
Well, they probably did, but we know that they weren't a certain age. They were only created then. But you see, the Bible is very, very specific about time, because it tells you how old. Say from Adam's point of view, his son Seth, how old Adam was when Seth was born, and how many years after that Adam lived. And then it says the same about Seth, how old he was when his son was born and how many years after that he lived. And it's very, very specific. And you get back to the down to the time of Noah, and that is 1,656 years after creation that the flood occurred. Now, I mean, that's very, very specific. And then when you look at the ages of the people after the flood, you find that Noah's three sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Shem's son Arphaxad was born 2 years after the flood. And then he lived so many years after that, and so on. I mean, it's very, very specific.
Yep.
And you can work out from the scriptures that Abraham lived about 2000 BC. And, BC. 2,000 years after Abraham, we get Jesus. And 2,000 years after Jesus, we get now. You know, I mean, you add it all up, and it comes to about 6,000 years of Earth history, according to the Bible. Yep. Now, anything that contradicts that, if the Bible is true, the contradiction is not true.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't get any simpler than that. And that's why people want to argue, we can't believe what the Bible says because it says that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Well, everything else that you find in the Bible checks out when you have something that you can compare it with. And so why would it not be right in its chronology? We say at Creation Ministries, that's it. You know, there was an eyewitness, just like we're talking about these lava flows at Mount Nurahoe. We know how old they were because there were eyewitnesses to it.
Yeah.
Now, we say that the Holy Spirit, who caused the Bible to be written, was the eyewitness, and therefore what the Word of God says is accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, Dr. John, another awesome week. And
have we come to the end?
We have.
We had so much more to talk about today.
Time just goes like that. How can we stop it? Can we use one of these clock-a-rockometer things somehow?
Yeah, stop the clock.
Oh wow! And then we've got somebody else from Creation Ministries in next week.
Dr. Mark Harwood next week. Now he is a real rocket scientist.
Yes.
You know, Mark was responsible for putting up the Optus GPS satellites. So every time you put your GPS on, right, he was the guy behind the satellites that get your GPS to work.
So if your GPS doesn't work, give him a call next week. No, I'm just joking.
Send him a text on the text line for next week if your GPS is faulty.
Absolutely, and we can probably ask him about aliens. He's probably a good alien man too. Yeah, he knows what's in space anyway.
Yeah, Mark's a great speaker. The listeners are going to love him next week.
Oh, awesome. Well, you are too. Thank you, Dr. John. Another great week. It is 9 minutes to 5. You're on 94.9. If you do have any questions for next week, please send them through to our text line. And that is an SMS line. Just send it 0401 949 949. That's 0401 949 949.